All right, welcome to 1409, and this is the start of all the mini lectures. So this is from Unit 1. Now, I know this is technically Chapter 12, and I say we start with Chapter 13, but I thought it was important to do a little bit of a review of classification, because we're going to hit on how do we organize all of this life, and you'll see scientific names, and you'll hear me throw those terms out, domain and kingdom, quite often. So I thought it'd be helpful if we go through and talk about it a little bit just to refresh our brains. So if you took me for 1408, this is going to look very familiar. So how do we organize all this? There's a lot of diversity in life. If you just go outside right now and just look around, you're going to see so many different things. You'll see plants, you'll see animals, there's a ton of stuff you don't see. But how do we organize all this? Well, one way we like to do that is by using phylogenic trees. So these are just basically diagrams. And we use these diagrams to predict how close things are related. Now, one thing that's important to remember, these are based off hypotheses, not definitive facts. We're gaining more and more information how we can actually go through and technically track evolution by using DNA sequencing and other methods. So that's kind of leading us to kind of get this a little bit more exact. Now, when you look at this tree, you're going to see like these different branches. What each branch is going to signify is an area of things that are more closely related. So for this one, we have it broken up into three big branches. We have the bacteria, the archaea, and the eukaryota. Now, these are the three big domains of life. And then within each branch, you're going to see smaller sub-branches. And then these are going to be smaller groupings within this. So they all have the same characteristics, but they have their own specific things that justify them to be branched off. And then as they are closer related, they're going to be closer on the branches too. Now, you can rotate this, turn this around in many different ways, but it's still the same thing. It's showing how everything is related. So let's look at the anatomy a little bit more. So when we go through, when we show this, we're saying that all species or anything on from this point on have evolved from a common ancestor. So this top one is talking about all the non-human primates. So we have the gibbons, the orangutans, the gorillas, the humans, the bonobo, and the chimpanzees. So we all had this one common ancestor, and it broke off, and then eventually you start to see things that happen, evolutionary changes that justify for a new species to be formed. And we keep going and going. So as you're closer related on this one branch will indicate how close you are in similarities. So we have a lot, we're closer related to the chimpanzee than we are to the gorilla. I forgot exact the amount of DNA, I think it was about 98% similar, which is quite fascinating. Now you're going to see diagrams like this below, especially when we get to the animals. When we use this, because the animal kingdom is so diverse, we spend a whole unit just talking about the different types of animals, and you're going to see it when we go all the way from sponges to reptiles, birds to jellyfish. There's so much out there. And one way that we go through and classify is by using like physical characteristics. So you're going to, first off, we'll break it up into two big groups, the invertebrates and the vertebrates. So do they have a backbone or they don't have a backbone? So we get to this part right here. Do they have a vertebral column? If no, it goes to this group right here. But if they do, we branch off right here. And then the next characteristic we looked at is, do they have a hinged jaw? If they don't, we classify them as lampreys. But if they did, then they went to this group right here where they were fish. So they do have a hinged jaw. The next characteristic we looked at, do they have legs? So fish don't. They go right here, but if they did, we broke it off. And then we keep going until we get to this final hierarchy right here. So you see all the different groups. So you're going to see these branches show up in different things, so especially when we do the animal kingdom. It just kind of helps us organize everything because it's very difficult to name all this stuff too. So that brings me up to nomenclature. Now we had to find a way to scientifically name everything, because if we just went by common names, there's so many different common names for everything, especially when I get to the slide about the scientific name anatomy right there, because for the mountain lion, it's also a cougar, it's also a puma, it's a Texas panther. There's like so many different common names. But in the scientific community, we need to have one generally agreed upon, name that we're going to use for scientific purposes. So that's why I use what we call the binomial system and nomenclature. Now, this was initially developed by Carl Linnaeus back in 1735. And we go through this process of updating this every 4 years because we're constantly discovering new species, and species are going extinct too. So we have to keep updating the system. And as we get increased technology, we're actually seeing the system warrant more organization. So this is constantly being updated, but it has the same foundation. That's always been the same. One thing that did change was like over in the 90s, we added the category domain, which is this bottom part right here of the pyramid. It's a little bit more broad. I think I actually wrote a paper when I was in English 101 when I was a freshman in college is when they were first starting to do this. And it was kind of weird at first because I remember when I was in the younger days, a long time ago, it always started with kingdom. But, you know, they went through and they agreed upon we needed a broader category to justify if you're a prokaryote or a eukaryote. Now, you'll see with this, you're going to see a lot of variety on the lower levels. And as we get more specific, it's going to kind of whittle down. You're going to see similar characteristics. So example, the domain is the broadest category here at the bottom. And as we keep going up on each of these higher levels, you're going to see certain characteristics that we're going to select for. So let me go over to this next slide. It has a little bit more information. So there's an order, all kinds of different ways you can remember the order of them. On the very first slide was a cheesy one. I always remember King Philip cried out for goodness sakes, but then sometimes you'll see, well, what about subspecies and domain? There's all kinds of little mnemonic devices that you can use to figure this out. Now, with domain, remember as I mentioned, these are going to be your eukaryotes right here. And this is going to have your plants, your fungi, your protists, and all your animals. So it's a wide variety right here. So then we broke it up into the next level of the pyramid. It gets a little more specific. So we're just talking about animals. So we knocked out the plants and we knocked out the fungi and the protist. So we have this wide diversity right here. So how is an insect related to a dog? Well, they're both eukaryotes. They have that membrane-bound nucleus. So let's get a little bit more specific. Now we're doing chordates. Do they have a backbone? Insects don't, so cross you out. So we're going through right here. So we have a backbone. And then we're talking those that are warm-blooded. So sorry, fish, you're out. And we just keep going until we get to the more specific levels. So we get to genus, then species, and then some of them are going to have that very top category of subspecies. Not everyone's going to have that, but the genus and the species are what we're going to use for the scientific name. So here's a way that you can actually go through and describe it. Now, when you do some of your projects, the plant scavenger hunt, the critters around you, you're going to have to put the scientific name on some slides with a picture of the animal that you or plant that you captured. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to use the system to identify it. Now, remember the scientific name is the genus and the species. So the genus is going to be first, and you're going to make sure you uppercase that first letter. The species will be second, and it's going to be lowercase. And if you're typing it, you're going to put it in italics. Now, if you're handwriting it, it's generally nomenclature is to go through and underline it. Now, this is the scientific name, but a lot of animals do have common names. So when you go through and you put the information for like a species for an animals, like if you're going to use your dog as an example on the critters around you, you're going to have to put the scientific name, but then you can put, you know, a common name like Yorkshire Terrier or dog, however you want to do it too. So the common name is to kind of give us a little bit, you know, normal everyday talking about it. But you can see there's a lot of common names that can refer to a specific species, refer to a specific scientific name. So as I mentioned, the broadest level is going to be the domains. And we're going to kind of break it up into three big parts. When I talk about the next lecture about the domains archaea and bacteria, these are very similar. They're going to be your prokaryotes. So if you remember, a prokaryote does not have a membrane-bound nucleus, and I'll briefly review you on that in that lecture. Now, the other domain is eukaryotes or eukarya. And these are ones that are going to have that membrane-bound nucleus. Now, what's unique about these, this is going to be broken up into further subkingdoms. We're going to have the protists, the plants, and the animals, and the fungi. Now, we're going to spend one lecture on these, and then we're going to spend another lecture just on protists, one on plants, a few on plants, just one on fungi, and then a whole unit just on animals. But what's important to look at that all of these guys right here relate to that one common ancestor, that one first cell that developed somehow. We don't know how it is, how it got here, but that one common ancestor developed, and then we had all these branches of diversity of life come from that one common ancestor, which I find that so amazing. So one level up from domain, when we get a little bit more specific, are the kingdoms. Now we have 3 domains, and then we go further and we have 6 kingdoms. Now of these 6 kingdoms, we have Animalia, Plantae, Fungi, Protista, Archaea, and Bacteria. Now these 4, animals, plants, fungi, and protists, these are all part of domain Eukarya. That means they have that membrane-bound nucleus. Now, archaea and bacteria used to be its own kingdom. They used to be put together. But as we got more and more information, we started to study these guys a little bit more. It was warranted that they needed to be broken off into 2 separate kingdoms. They're both prokaryotes, but the main difference is true bacteria are probably what you think of when you think of E. coli and staph and all the other stuff. The archaea bacteria, they're a type of bacteria, but they're more hardy. They like the extreme environments. They're extremophiles. And when we look at the actual break-off of life, they are closer related to all of the eukaryotes than they are to bacteria, which is quite fascinating. So we're going to go into this a little bit more detail in the following lectures. Now you're going to see this at the end of all of them. It's review videos. They're optional. Sometimes they're fun. Sometimes they might actually be informational that, you might be beneficial to watch. I've had students say they enjoy them. I tried to put some fun stuff in there too. There's all kinds of cool stuff out there, and I wish we could have been face-to-face because we could have watched so much fun stuff. But these are there. Sometimes hearing someone else talk about it too, multiple different ways helps. So these are optional, and you'll see them pretty much on every lecture. And then at the end will be all the credits for all the images that I used. So I'm going to stop this one right here.